Good evening. Welcome once again to the Rabbi Study. This evening, it is our privilege to spend some time with Rabbi Mark Borovitz. Rabbi Borovitz is the spiritual leader and one of the founders of Beit Tshuva, leading Jewish recovery center in America, a scholar of Abraham Joshua Heschel's spirituality, and an advocate for those who have found their lives in trouble. And many souls have been rescued by Rabbi Borovitz and by his wonderful wife, Harriet Rosetto. Good evening, Mark. How are you tonight?
Good evening, Ed. I am great.
Great. So you have been working in recovery for 35 years. What does the experience of recovery bring to an experience like this with its social isolation, its fear of disease, and the sort of upheaval that we're all going through?
Well, it's interesting because now the general public gets to experience the powerlessness that an addict experiences all the time. Addiction comes out of a feeling of powerlessness, and how do I get out of it? And addiction is about isolation and everything we're going through now, social distancing. And so really, recovery is about how to live in the now and how to live with one's own powerlessness. So looking for solution rather than being right. Seeing how community helps no matter what way that community has to be accessed, virtually or physically. And most of all, knowing that we don't control shit, and a power greater than ourselves, God, can restore us to sanity and give us the way of living that's compatible, as Rabbi Heschel says, with the mystery of life.
So let's go one step deeper in that. The powerlessness that people are feeling, a disease that you can't see, a disease that is communicated even when a person's asymptomatic, the powerlessness over an economy that's overwhelming, at the same time it's crashing, the powerlessness of being socially isolated. Go deeper and tell me what the experience of recovery says to this person who is suffering this the sense of inner upheaval, the anxiety of this powerlessness. What should they do?
Well, in recovery, what we do immediately is we go to God. We go deep into our souls. We see, again, as Rabbi Heschel says, that we have great challenges. And the deeper our challenges and the greater our challenges, the more human we can be and the more human we are. So in recovery, we acknowledge our own humanity, knowing that we're flawed, that we're fearful, that we're powerless, that we can't control. And all we can control is ourselves. So you may not know this about me, Rabbi Feinstein, but there are times when I get volatile. And there's a part of me that can't control it. You and I have spoken about it all these years, that I have this fire in my belly. It's the prophetic, it's the prophet Jeremiah who keeps speaking. It's all the prophets who keep speaking. And so the powerlessness can even be in something good. I'm powerless not to do something. So this feeling of powerlessness says, okay, all I can control is me. How am I going to respond? Or am I going to react? Fear of the unknown is a reaction. Fear of, if I go out and I hang out with people, I could be spreading this, is a healthy fear. So it's knowing which fear to go with. But most of all, it's how do I stay grounded in God, in the people I love, and the people I know, and in my own soul. Because ultimately, that's where our strength's going to come from. The scientists, the epidemiologists, everybody when they go deep into their soul and they connect with other people on that soul to soul level, that's the only place power comes from.
Recovery, as I understand it, is in many ways a very deeply social experience. You go to a group, you have a sponsor, you do this as a collective. In fact, going to meetings is the sort of rubric, this is the sort of language that you use when you're going through the process of recovery. Right? So we are intensely social creatures. And what that suggests is that if I'm going to get back to my soul and really get honest with myself, I need other people to help me do that. But now I find myself socially isolated. I'm stuck in my house, I'm stuck in my apartment, I'm staring at a computer screen. So what does this moment teach us about the necessity of staying connected with people? Put it this way, when all of this is over, what would be the very best outcome, the very best truth that we could take from this moment of crisis and social isolation?
What every addict knows, which is I need a hug. I need to be in a circle of people that care about me and that love me and that accept me. That's the greatest lesson we can take from this. Now, in the meantime, I'm seeing a lot of people on Zoom. Friends, I'm doing FaceTime with people. And so what we've done is in the recovery is we put meetings online immediately because we know how important it is for us to talk to each other. But it's also important for us to talk to other people. So what this has done, I think, actually has pointed out for all of you normal people how important being grounded in oneself and really being connected on a soul to soul level is instead of role to role. In recovery, there is no role. It doesn't matter if you're the president of GM or the bum on the street. We're all in this together. So I think another lesson that everybody should take out of this is that we are all in this together. There is no protection that our money, that our gated communities, that anything is going to give us when the pandemic hits. That what we have, the only strength we have, is following the smart advice of the people who are experts, not our politicians, and in being together in whatever way we can, but on a soul to soul level.
You've always taught me that truth telling is the real soul of recovery. It's the soul of authenticity. And that the lies that we tell each other, the lies that we tell ourselves, are the real enemy. That's the real doorway to addiction. So, what truth and what lies are revealed by this crisis?
You ask deep and rich questions, my friend. One of the truths is that we are all human beings. And what happens to one happens to all. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice to one is injustice for everyone. Rabbi Heschel said, prejudice is an eye disease and a cancer of the soul. We're learning this. Another truth is that when our experts tell us something, be it experts in intelligence, experts in science, experts in faith, experts in morality, when they say this is where we're going or this is what's happening, we have to listen to them. The lie is, I am not going to be affected by this because I have money, I have education, I have protection, I have my drugs, I have my this, I have my that. Another lie is what happens in China doesn't impact me. Okay, it's going on in Italy, but who cares? You know, I'm reminded of Martin Niemöller's poem. When they came for any other group, I wasn't part of it, to paraphrase him. When they came for me, there was nobody there. So this idea that I am not connected to you and to every other soul in this world, that is the great lie. And instead of trying to beat everybody up, to be Tarzan, no, I have to know that I need your vine. I need you to send me a vine so I can move from point A to point B. That it's not all me. This rugged individualism is a lie. And that we have to stop listening to the lies. The lies of the far left, the lies of the far right. That the people, the majority of the people who are in the center, who sometimes go this way, sometimes go that way. People who are willing to explore and search for truth rather than know the truth. We're the people that have to we have to regain our voices because we've listened to the yellers too much.
You've started a wonderful new project of teaching a Heschel a day, a short snippet from one of Dr. Heschel's, Rabbi Heschel's writings each day. And, you know, over the years, you've become quite the scholar of Heschel's thought and Heschel's approach to life. And I know that you have a very close relationship with his daughter, Susanna, who's visited the house many times and was terribly taken with how Heschel's wisdom has become part of the rhythm of Beit Tshuva, part of the rhythm of its residents and its congregants. So if you use your imagination with me for a moment, what would he be saying today? If Rabbi Heschel were with us today, what would he be preaching?
Rabbi Heschel would be preaching to the governments to get off your tuchuses and get everything that we need. Get the brightest people together to find all of the solutions that we can find. Do not let someone else die like my father died in the Spanish flu pandemic. Do not let communities and groups of people be decimated like my people were in the Holocaust. Stop saying 100,000 lives lost would be success. One life lost is a failure. We have the way to do it. Let's get together. Government, stop lying. Governments, work together. Scientists, go beyond the borders of your country and meet each other in the place of spirit and God. That's what I think he would be saying.
And that's what he'd say to governments. But what would he say to individuals, to those of us stuck in our homes filled with fear at this moment?
I just studied this with a group of people. One of Rabbi Heschel's, I think, main, and I don't know how he got there, but really a foundational part of his life and the way he lived was in radical amazement. He said the greatest hindrance to knowledge is our adjustment to conventional notions, to mental cliches. Wonder or radical amazement, the state of maladjustment to words and notions, is therefore a prerequisite for an authentic awareness of that which is. So I think he would say to people, listen, he would say to us, what I hear him say to me, listen, give up, let go of the conventional notion of being trapped. Right now, what is that you have to shelter in place so people can live. Be part of a community that gives life. Be part of a community that connects. Thank God we have the way to connect through the internet. 60, 70, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, people couldn't connect like this. We have the technology. Let's use it for good. Let's make virtual reality real reality, in that the connections we make like this, me speaking to you, me speaking to the people that listen and watch this, this is not just pontification. This is a connection that I'm telling you, I care. And you care. And we can care for each other. That I have to have an authentic awareness of this moment and know, what did I learn? What are we going to learn from this? So one of the things that I know is not having coffee with you on Friday, it hurts me. I miss it. Not being able to give you a hug. I feel adrift. Being able to talk with you like this brings me back to center. So knowing, being able to live in radical amazement, being surprised, not taking anything for granted, not using old ways, but seeing everybody new, seeing myself new in this moment, and realizing that I'm going to learn something today. I'm going to connect with somebody today. Being grateful that we have this technology to use. Think of 100 years ago. Hell, think of 60, 70 years ago. They didn't have this during the war. Nobody could just call up on their cell phone. Nobody could connect on the internet. We're blessed right now, he would tell us. Remember that we're blessed. Even in this pandemic, we are blessed because we have ways. We have brilliant people. We have people who are working on the solution, and we can be part of it in our own ways. We can volunteer. We can volunteer to stay home. We can shop for somebody if you're of the right age. We can do things for each other, and we can connect. Radical amazement and authentic awareness of what is, taking nothing for granted, and knowing we're going to learn every day together. That's, I think, what he would say to us as individuals. One of the things.
I would imagine, and I more than imagine, I understand from our time together that Passover is a very special time for people at Beit Tshuva, for people who are in recovery. I have a holiday that begins with the notion that all of us were once slaves, that we struggled with the process of redemption, and that we found our way to liberation.
Yes.
So let's turn to Passover for a minute, and particularly what you've learned about Passover, what you've taught about Passover, from the perspective of folks who are in recovery. I remember once you told me a story of a school you visited, and after you gave your presentation about children and drugs and the other mistakes that the bad choices that kids make, some gentleman raised his hand and said, "But Rabbi, you don't understand. Our kids don't do that.
Yeah.
Our kids aren't into that." Right. And there is an old saying, the old Yiddish saying was a shikar is a goy, which means that's not things Jews do. Right. Alcohol, gambling, addictions of all kinds. Those are not Jewish problems. Those are not problems. Those who were normal, as it were, you distance themselves from those who are addicts by saying, "That's not my problem. That's not who I am." So let's begin with this notion of, in every generation, we see ourselves as slaves in Egypt. How does that reflect upon the experience of addiction and recovery?
Are you purposely trying to get me to have an outburst?
I would never do such a thing.
Of course, Jews are susceptible to all of this. We get 600 calls a month from Jewish people. We have 140 beds. We are constantly, and there are Jewish groups all over the country. So Jews have this. The question is, do we see ourselves as being redeemed from Egypt? What, we have this original play, Freedom Song, and the theme of it is, what are you a slave to? So think about Pesach. We do a preparation usually. So there's 4 names of the holiday. The first name is Chag HaPesach, the festival of death passing or skipping over us. So if I look at this year, if you look at this year, how is death, and especially in this time, are we grateful that death has passed over us? Because those of us who are at the Seder are alive. There's people that we knew a month ago that we might have invited to our Seder that unfortunately, God forbid, might not be. So we say the Shechayonu at Pesach. Do we really understand the power and the miracle of us being here? I mean, look, I don't know how this thing gets passed. I don't think it gets passed because people are doing stupid things. Certainly didn't start that way. So we're blessed and we have to appreciate that. And most of us take being alive for granted. So if you live in wonder and radical amazement, you never take it for granted. So the first thing I have to know is I'm a slave to taking life for granted. The only one that's going to help us get out of that slavery is God. Our own soul, our own awareness. The second name is, of course, Hag HaAviv, the festival of spring or rejuvenation. How are we going to rejuvenate our lives? I mean, this is really powerful and appropriate right now, because how are we going to rejuvenate life in our country, in our world, in our families, in our community, in our temples? My big fear is people are going to think, oh, I don't have to go to temple anymore. I don't have to go to this anymore. I don't have to go to that anymore. I can just do it all online. And then we miss that human connection. And without that human connection, we are killing ourselves. We're back to death. So, how am I a slave to same old, same old? How am I a slave to not appreciating rejuvenation? Third, Hag HaMatzot. How am I a slave to my own puffed up ego? When I first got into the program Alcoholics Anonymous, I met a gentleman and he said to me, he didn't think I was impressed enough by him. He said, don't you know who I think I am? My own puffed up ego, don't you know who I think I am? And how many different ways that comes out and how many times I get into trouble because of it. One of my worst things is that I get puffed up and then I have an outburst. And that causes me trouble, and it causes my wife trouble, and it causes my community trouble, my family, my friends. And I'm in the midst of that right now. And you know what? I'm doing tshuva the best way I can. And as I go to Pesach next week, I know that I have to keep making sure my ego is right-sized. That I see me for who I am, and that I start to temper my frustration with injustice and mendacity. Because when I don't, then I participate in it. So, how do I make sure that I go down to basics, which is me, God, and you? And it's interesting because this year at Pesach, all of us are going to be just with the people in our home. And are we going to really appreciate that this is core? And then whoever we're online with, that they're part of the circle. And we can keep just knowing that we're going to stay together. My brother's going to do a Seder that all of us are going to zoom in for. So that every one of us are going to be together in ways that we've never been together in years because we've been in different cities. So how great is that? Making sure that I stay right-sized is probably the most important thing. And as you and I have spoken, Rabbi Feinstein, matzah and chametz only have one different letter. In matzah, there's a hey, which is open. In chametz, there's a chaf, which is closed. How am I going to be open this year, more open this year to life and to God and to community? How am I going to see after this pandemic how important it is to be with the people that I know and to contribute myself, my resources, financial, personal, spiritual, mental, physical, to help everyone come back together in a stronger way. That I'm going to vote this year because my vote matters. I matter. And most of all, you matter. And the last is, are we going to get free this year? Is this really going to be the season of our freedom that between now and in Shavuos, we're going to see the end of this pandemic? Please, God. And then we come together on Shavuos and we really study all night because we know that we have come through. We've come through destruction, Hamas. We've come through Hamas and we've come through it and we're together. And being together is more important than virtual. Virtual is good as a substitute, but it's not the real thing. That's what this, if we just take the four names of the Chag, just like that, we can find out all of the things we become slaves to. Maybe by then we'll be so tired of technology that when we're together, we won't be looking at our phones. Please God, that happens to me.
Let's expand on that last idea for a moment. So Shavuos comes and gives us mitzvot. Now, mitzvot are commandments. What's the role of a commandment, of a discipline, in making us free people? Doesn't a commandment limit the freedom? A lot of people see rules as limiting freedom. So what's the role of a rule, of a commandment, of an imperative in making me a free person?
You're doing it. You're getting me there. So our teacher, Rabbi Jonathan Omerman, taught me about Pesach and taught me about the three stages between Pesach, the day before Pesach and the day of and Shavuos. The first stage is slavery. So we get that. At Pesach, we do not get free. We get liberated. We get brought out of bondage. Freedom happens in the fourth promise that God gives us. First promise is out from the bondage of the Egyptians. The second promise is redeemed. The third, saved. The third promise is redeemed. The fourth promise is you'll be my people and I'll be your God. Up until then, it's liberty. Between Pesach and Shavuos, we're in liberty. We can do our own thing. It's like the 60s. It's like today. Everybody's doing their own thing. Or last January, this past January, everybody was doing their own thing. Commandments. Freedom is when we accept the authority of God. That's what Rabbi Omerman taught me. And it's so true for me because, think about this. We get, I wrote this, it's only at Sinai when we accept God's authority that we become free. When we're under God's authority, we have choice to follow God, to walk humbly with God, or not. Up until then, we don't have any choices. If all we're doing is following our desires, if all we're doing is following the Pharaoh, the enslaver, then only when we follow God do we have actual free will choice. And we can make free will moral choices or free will immoral choices. So the commandments, rather than limiting me, they give me a path and a discipline. And as you and I have spoken about over the years, there's many ways to fulfill the commandments. And nobody's going to do them all. Not even the most religious person is going to do all of the commandments because then they'd be perfect. And we know we're human, we ain't perfect. So for me, it's freedom is being able to make informed choices, and I can't make informed choices if I don't have God's will and God's way in front of me, if I haven't accepted that authority. And as we know from the third chapter of Genesis, even when you live in paradise, you still go against God's authority, right? Adam and Eve. And God doesn't care if we go against God's authority. God cares if we hide from God. So Shavuos, accepting the mitzvot, na'aseh v'nishma, is saying we're not going to hide. And isn't that the greatest freedom? This Pesach, if we make the decision every day from Pesach to Shavuos to come out of our own hiding a little bit more, because we hide as human beings. We're afraid to tell you who I am because you won't like me. Rather than see that people love us for who we are, the good and the not so good. And that's the real story of Pesach. God loves us even though we continually disappoint God. So why wouldn't I want the mitzvot to have that kind of a relationship?
So, Rabbi Borovitz, many families are finding themselves this Pesach in very strange position. They would normally gather around the Seder table. They would normally have family friends over. They would normally be sharing sumptuous meals. But this year is going to be different. This year's different. Manish Tana, this year is different from all other years. We're separated from each other. It's not easy to get groceries. So it's going to be a simpler Pesach, in some ways a lonelier Pesach. Is there something we can bring to the Seder table this year which will make it special? Is there something that this new condition imposes upon us that elevates actually and makes Pesach a little more special?
I think so. Even if we're Zooming with other family members, other friends. One of the customs, the minhags that we have at Beit Shuvah is writing down the slavery we're going to leave. So if every person shares with the people at their table, people on Zoom, what slavery do I need to leave? And will you help me get free? And have a conversation about how we get free from our slaveries. Realizing that the story about B'nai Brak was not that the rabbis forgot about when to say the Shema, but they were planning the Bar Kokhba revolt. They were planning how do we get free from the Romans. Now that was on a global level. If we bring it down to the personal, that I write down how do I get free from this outburst that I do. Harriet, how do you help me? What help do I need? and get real about who we are and our fears and our triumphs, and how I can help Harriet, how she can help me, how my brother can help me, how I help my sister, etc., etc., etc. My daughter, my grandson. I have a grandson I'm so thrilled about. So he's pulling things off, shelves. He's at that stage. He pulled a book off the shelf. The first book he ever pulled off the shelf, Essential Writings by Dr. Susanna Heschel. What could be better? But letting him know that I am here, I'm his grandfather, and there's nothing will ever stop me from loving him. So if we, this year, concentrate on, here's when I need to be free. And once we're able to be with each other, here's how we're going to be free together. That we start this chain of freedom, individual, so that we can make it a collective. That would be a Passover like no other, because it would be the personal experience as well as the historical experience. And then it becomes communal experience. So how am I going to help my shul be free? How am I going to help my Jewish community be free? How am I going to help the larger community I live in be freer this year? How am I going to make sure that no one is left behind? 20% of the Jews, they say, or the Midrashes say, only 20% left Egypt, but that was because the 80% was too afraid. So how do we make sure that the 80% of the people that are too afraid to leave the streets, too afraid to leave their homes, too afraid for everything, what do we need to do this year to liberate them and give them a sense of community and of foundation? But it can't happen if I don't have it. So we start with the individual in order to go to the family, in order to go to the shul, the community, in order to go to the larger community, and then eventually to the city and the world. That's what this Pesach gives us the opportunity to do.
One of the most wonderful things you ever did at Beit Shuvah was organizing a show called Freedom Song, which was created out of the personal stories of the residents of Beit Shuvah. And it's a marvelous, marvelous dramatic presentation, musical presentation, which juxtaposes two groups: a family at a Seder table with a child, a member of the family who's trying to come in from the outside, and the family is reticent to bring them home, and the group, the AA group or the NA group that welcomes everyone's confessions. And that it was a touching thing. And I remember as the show developed, because each new resident brought their own story to the show, it was an organic creation, and it's still going on. Is it available online somewhere? Can I watch it? Can I watch part of it? Is it on YouTube?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but if any of it is available, it will be up on YouTube. Yes.
Go look on YouTube, because it's quite remarkable. Rabbi Borovitz, I want to wish you and your whole family a happy and a healthy and a sweet Pesach. I hope it's a good Pesach for you, and I hope we get to be together soon. Give you a hug, okay? Take good care.
And thank you, Rabbi Feinstein, and I wish you and your family and whom I love the sweetest of liberations this year also.
Thank you. And this is Rabbi Ed Feinstein from the Rabbi's Study. Thank you for being with us. We wish you a happy, healthy Passover. Take care.